Kira Volkov adjusted her oversized cardigan for the third time as she walked through the sliding glass doors of Elite Fitness Center. At 22, she carried herself with the careful posture of someone trying to take up as little space as possible. Her slight frame seemed even smaller beneath the baggy clothes she favored, and her dark hair hung like a curtain around her pale face. Wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose completed the image of someone who belonged in a library rather than a gym. The fitness center buzzed with the usual afternoon crowd. Machines whirred, weights clanked, and conversations echoed off the high ceilings. Kira had joined 3 weeks ago after moving to the city for her new job as a software developer. The quiet corner with the stretching mats had become her refuge, where she could go through her carefully disguised routine without drawing attention. Just keep your head down, she reminded herself, the same mantra that had gotten her through high school, college, and now this. Don't give them a reason to notice you. Well, look what we have here. The voice cut through her concentration like a blade. Kira looked up from her yoga mat to see 3 women approaching. The leader, a blonde with perfectly sculpted muscles and a sports bra that displayed her six-pack abs, wore a smirk that Kira recognized all too well. Madison Pierce, the gym's unofficial queen bee, a former college athlete who treated the fitness center like her personal kingdom. Behind her stood 2 loyal subjects, Jessica, a redhead with arms like tree trunks, and Amber, whose fake tan couldn't hide the predatory gleam in her eyes. I thought I smelled something nerdy over here, Madison continued, her voice loud enough to draw glances from nearby gym members. What are you even doing in a real gym, library girl? Kira's muscles tensed instinctively, but she forced herself to remain calm. Not here, not now. Too many witnesses. Too much to lose. Just stretching, she replied quietly, starting to roll up her mat. Madison laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Stretching? Honey, stretching won't fix whatever's wrong with that sad little body of yours. She gestured dismissively at Kira's loose-fitting workout clothes. Maybe try the senior center instead. I hear they have water aerobics. Jessica and Amber cackled on cue. Around them, other gym members continued their workouts, carefully avoiding eye contact. A few personal trainers noticed the commotion, but turned away, unwilling to confront Madison Pierce. Everyone knew she was dating the gym owner's son. Kira's jaw clenched slightly, but she kept her voice level. I'm not bothering anyone. Actually, you are. Madison stepped closer, invading Kira's personal space. See, this is a gym for serious athletes, not computer nerds playing dress-up. She reached out and flicked Kira's glasses, nearly knocking them off her face. Why don't you go find a nice book club or something? Breathe, count to 10, walk away. The internal voice that had kept Kira out of trouble for years spoke louder than the other voice. The one that whispered about exactly how many ways she could end this conversation in under 30 seconds. I'll just finish up somewhere else, Kira said, gathering her things. Smart girl, Madison called after her. Maybe there's hope for you yet. As Kira walked toward the locker room, she caught her reflection in the mirrored wall. For just a moment, her carefully constructed mask slipped, and something dangerous flickered in her dark eyes. Something that belonged in a cage, not a corporate gym, but only for a moment. The next day brought more of the same. Madison and her crew had apparently decided that tormenting the quiet new member was their new favorite entertainment. When Kira tried to use the elliptical machine, they crowded around her, making loud comments about her form. When she moved to the weight section, they followed, laughing about how the 5-pound dumbbells might be too heavy for stick arms. Maybe we should spot her, Jessica suggested with mock concern as Kira reached for a 10-pound weight. Wouldn't want her to hurt herself. Good thinking, Madison agreed. Can't be too careful with the delicate types. They formed a semicircle around Kira, their presence both suffocating and intimidating. Other gym members glanced over but quickly looked away, unwilling to get involved. The staff remained conspicuously absent whenever Madison's harassment sessions began. Kira completed her set in silence, her movements precise and controlled, despite the mockery surrounding her. Inside her head, she calculated angles, distance, and leverage. 3 seconds to disable Jessica, 2 more for Amber. Madison would be more challenging, but still manageable. Instead, she racked the weights and walked away. "That's right," Madison called after her. "Know your place, bookworm." The pattern continued for 2 weeks. Kira would arrive, attempt her workout, endure the harassment, and leave. She never raised her voice, never responded with more than a few quiet words, never showed any sign of the violence she was capable of, because violence was exactly what she was trying to escape. Kira Volkov wasn't just any software developer. 3 years ago, she'd been the Phantom, the most feared fighter in the underground MMA circuit. Undefeated in 37 matches, she'd earned a reputation for ending fights with surgical precision. Her specialty was taking down opponents twice her size, using their own momentum against them. But the underground world had demanded more than just fighting. The deeper she'd gotten, the darker it became. Fixed matches, illegal betting, connections to people who solved problems with permanent solutions. When her promoter had started talking about expanding her role, Kira had seen where the path led. So she disappeared, changed her name, moved across the country, and buried the Phantom so deep that sometimes she almost forgot she'd ever existed. She'd built a new life, a clean life, where her biggest challenge was debugging code instead of breaking bones. Never again, she'd promised herself. No matter what happens, I won't go back to being that person. But Madison Pierce was making that promise increasingly difficult to keep. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Kira had arrived at the gym to find Madison's crew gathered around the stretching area, clearly waiting for her. Their smiles were sharp enough to cut glass. "Oh, good, you're here," Madison said with false sweetness. "We've been talking about you." Kira set down her bag cautiously. "I'm just here to work out." "See, that's the thing," Madison continued, her voice rising to ensure maximum audience. "We've been discussing gym membership policies, and we think there should be some standards." She pulled out her phone and held it up, the camera app open. "I mean, look at yourself. Baggy clothes, no muscle tone, probably can't even bench press the bar. You're bringing down the whole vibe of this place." "Madison, please." No, this is important," Madison interrupted, starting to record. "Everyone should see what happens when gyms lower their standards. It's like a nature documentary. Here, we see the suburban computer nerd in her natural habitat, desperately pretending she belongs among actual athletes." Amber and Jessica laughed on cue, and several other gym members stopped their workouts to watch. Some looked uncomfortable, but none intervened. "Come on, show us your best pose," Madison continued, circling Kira with the phone. "Let's see those muscles you've been building." Kira's hands slowly clenched into fists. Her breathing became controlled, measured. Anyone who knew what to look for would have recognized the signs of a predator preparing to strike. Madison didn't know what to look for. "Ooh, are those fists? Is the little computer girl going to fight me?" Madison zoomed in on Kira's hands. "This is perfect. Everyone's going to love seeing the gym nerd have a meltdown." "Stop recording," Kira said quietly. "Or what? You'll report me to management?" Madison laughed. "Honey, I've been a member here for 5 years. My boyfriend's family owns the place. You're just some nobody who wandered in off the street." The phone continued recording, capturing every word, every humiliation. Around them, the audience grew larger. Even the staff had emerged from their hiding spots, though they maintained their careful distance. "You know what I think," Madison continued, her voice dripping with false concern. "I think you joined this gym to creep on real athletes. I bet you go home and fantasize about having a body like mine. She stepped closer, the phone inches from Kira's face. Why don't you just admit it? Tell everyone you're a pathetic wannabe who doesn't belong here. For a moment, the gym fell completely silent. Even the music seemed to fade into the background. Kira stood perfectly still, her head bowed, glasses reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights. Just walk away. Don't give them what they want. Don't become the monster again. But then Madison made her final mistake. Actually, you know what? I don't think you should come back here anymore. She reached out and deliberately knocked Kira's glasses off her face, sending them clattering across the floor. Oops, clumsy me. The glasses hit the ground and skittered under a nearby machine. In the silence that followed, Kira slowly raised her head. Without the glasses, her face was transformed. The soft, vulnerable features remained, but her eyes belonged to someone who had never lost a fight. Dark, cold, and absolutely merciless. Madison was still smiling when Kira moved. It happened so fast that most of the watching crowd missed it entirely. One moment Madison was standing there with her phone, triumphant and cruel. The next, she was on the ground, her wrist bent at an uncomfortable angle, the phone spinning away across the floor. Kira stood over her, still in that same loose cardigan, still looking like someone who belonged in a library, except for her eyes. You want to see what I'm capable of? Kira's voice was quiet, but it carried throughout the silent gym. You want to know if I belong here? Madison tried to sit up, confusion replacing arrogance on her face. What the hell? Kira moved again. This time everyone saw it clearly. A simple step forward, a perfectly executed throw, and Madison was airborne. She landed hard on the thick mat, the impact driving the air from her lungs. My name, Kira said, walking slowly around the sprawled form of her former tormentor, is not computer girl or bookworm or nobody. Jessica started forward, but Kira's gaze stopped her cold. There was something primal in that look, something that spoke to the deepest survival instincts. Jessica froze like a rabbit that had suddenly realized it was in the presence of a wolf. My name is Kira Volkov, and for 3 years, I was the underground MMA champion of the entire Western Circuit. Madison struggled to her feet, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. That's impossible. You're just some nerdy... Kira interrupted her with a demonstration. She moved with fluid grace, shadowboxing combinations that whistled through the air. Each punch was thrown with textbook precision, each movement flowing seamlessly into the next. This wasn't someone who had learned to fight in a suburban gym. This was someone who had made a living with her fists. 37 fights, Kira continued, her movements never stopping. 37 wins, most of them against people twice my size. She glanced meaningfully at Madison, people who thought they could judge a book by its cover. The crowd around them had grown silent, mesmerized by the transformation. The quiet girl in the baggy cardigan had become something else entirely, something dangerous and beautiful and absolutely terrifying. You want to know why I don't fight anymore? Kira stopped her shadowboxing and faced Madison directly. Because I was too good at it, because people like you always pushed until they found out what I was really capable of. Madison backed away, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. Look, I was just what? Just bullying someone you thought couldn't fight back? Kira's voice remained calm, but there was something underneath it that made everyone in earshot take an involuntary step backward. Just making my life miserable because you could get away with it. She picked up her glasses and put them back on, instantly transforming back into the quiet girl everyone had dismissed. But now, they all knew what lay beneath the surface. Here's what's going to happen, Kira said, addressing not just Madison but the entire watching crowd. I'm going to continue coming to this gym. I'm going to work out in peace. And if anyone decides they want to test whether I've gotten soft. She let the sentence hang in the air, unfinished but perfectly clear. Madison straightened her sports bra with shaking hands. You can't just attack people. I didn't attack anyone, Kira replied calmly. I defended myself. After weeks of harassment, threats, and destruction of my personal property. She gestured to where her glasses had been knocked off, all of which was recorded on your phone. For the first time, Madison seemed to realize the implications. Her illegal recording had captured her own confession of deliberate harassment. In the hands of the right lawyer, it would make an excellent evidence exhibit. But here's the thing, Kira continued, her voice taking on an almost conversational tone. I didn't come here to be a fighter. I came here to be a normal person with a normal life. And I'm going to have that, whether you like it or not. She began gathering her things, moving with the same careful precision she'd shown in her brief demonstration. The underground fighting world taught me a lot of things. How to read people, how to identify threats, how to neutralize them efficiently. Jessica and Amber had begun backing toward the exit, clearly wanting no part of whatever was about to happen. But the most important thing it taught me, Kira said, slinging her bag over her shoulder, was when to stop. She walked toward Madison, who flinched despite herself, but Kira simply extended her hand. I don't want to be your enemy, she said quietly. I never did. I just want to be left alone. Madison stared at the offered hand for a long moment. Around them, the entire gym held its breath. Finally, reluctantly, she reached out and shook it. Good, Kira said, her grip firm but not threatening. I'm glad we understand each other. She turned to address the crowd that had gathered. I know what some of you are thinking. You're wondering if I'm going to become the new bully, if I'm going to start picking on people the way Madison picked on me. She shook her head slowly. That's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. I've spent the last 3 years trying to prove to myself that strength doesn't have to mean cruelty. That being capable of violence doesn't mean choosing violence. Her gaze swept across the watching faces, many of whom looked ashamed for their earlier inaction. But I also learned that sometimes, the only way to stop a bully is to show them what real strength looks like. The gym manager, a nervous man in his 50s, finally worked up the courage to approach. Miss Volkov, I think we should discuss. There's nothing to discuss, Kira interrupted gently. Madison and I have worked out our differences. Haven't we, Madison? Madison nodded quickly, still rubbing her wrist where Kira had grabbed it. Yeah, we're good. Excellent, Kira smiled, and for the first time since joining the gym, it reached her eyes. I'll see you all tomorrow then. She walked toward the exit, the crowd parting before her like water. Just before she reached the door, she paused and looked back. Oh, and Madison? You might want to work on your takedown defense, in case you ever decide to try actual fighting instead of just bullying people who can't fight back. The door closed behind her with a soft whisper, leaving the gym in stunned silence. The next day, Kira arrived at her usual time, wearing her usual oversized cardigan and wire-rimmed glasses. She nodded politely to the staff, set up at her preferred stretching mat, and began her routine. Madison and her crew were nowhere to be seen. Word had spread overnight. The quiet girl in the corner wasn't just a software developer. She was the Phantom, the underground legend who had retired undefeated. People who had ignored her harassment now made a point of nodding respectfully when she passed. The personal trainers who had turned blind eyes to Madison's behavior suddenly became very interested in proper gym etiquette. A week later, Madison returned. She kept her distance, worked out quietly, and left without incident. When their paths crossed, she nodded politely, almost deferentially. The predatory gleam was gone from her eyes, replaced by something that might have been respect. or fear. Kira didn't mind which it was. 2 months after the confrontation, Kira was approached by a young man who'd been working out near the free weights. She recognized him as one of the bystanders who had watched Madison's harassment without intervening. "Excuse me," he said nervously. "Miss Volkov?" Kira looked up from her stretching, raising an eyebrow in polite inquiry. "I just wanted to apologize," he continued, his face flushed with embarrassment. For not saying anything before. When Madison was bothering you, I should have spoken up." Kira studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "What's your name?" "David. David Martinez." "Well, David," Kira said, sitting up on her mat, "the fact that you're apologizing now tells me something important about your character. Most people who stay silent in the face of bullying convince themselves they didn't really see anything wrong." David shifted uncomfortably. "I knew it was wrong. I didn't want to get involved. Madison's connected, you know, her boyfriend's family." "I understand," Kira said simply. "Fear is a powerful motivator, but so is courage once you find it." She gestured to the mat beside her. "Want to know a secret, David?" He sat down cautiously, nodding. "I was scared too," Kira admitted. "Every single day, I was terrified that someone would push me far enough to make me forget who I was trying to become, that I'd let the monster out and not be able to put it back." David frowned. "But you're the Phantom. You were never defeated." "In the ring, no," Kira agreed. "But the real fight was always with myself. The underground world. It changes you. It makes you think that the only way to solve problems is with violence. I spent 3 years learning to be someone different." She pulled off her glasses and cleaned them thoughtfully. "The hardest part wasn't learning to fight, David. It was learning when not to." "So why did you finally fight back?" Kira considered the question seriously. "Because sometimes the only way to protect who you want to be is to remember who you used to be." Madison wasn't going to stop. She was escalating, and eventually she would have pushed someone else the same way, someone who couldn't defend themselves. She put her glasses back on and smiled at David. "The goal isn't to never use your strength, it's to use it responsibly, to protect the people who need protecting, not to dominate the people who annoy you." David nodded slowly. "So what's the difference?" "Intent," Kira said immediately. "Madison wanted to hurt me because it made her feel powerful. I stopped her because it was necessary. The action might look the same from the outside, but the motivation is everything." Over the following months, the gym became a different place. Not because of fear, but because of awareness. People were more conscious of how they treated others, more willing to speak up when they saw something wrong. David, inspired by his conversation with Kira, had become something of an advocate for newer members who seemed overwhelmed by the environment. Madison still worked out there, but she was no longer the unofficial queen. Her crew had disbanded, and she spent her time focused on her own training rather than tormenting others. Once, Kira had caught her helping an elderly man adjust a machine properly, something the old Madison would never have done. Progress, Kira reflected, came in many forms. 6 months after the confrontation, Kira was approached by the gym owner himself. Robert Pierce was Madison's boyfriend's father, a successful businessman who had built the fitness center chain from nothing. "Miss Volkov," he said, extending his hand, "I wonder if I could have a word." Kira shook his hand, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact. Unlike his son's girlfriend, Robert Pierce had the confidence of someone who had earned his position rather than inherited it. "Of course, Mr. Pierce. I owe you an apology," he said without preamble, "and an explanation." Kira waited, curious. "I knew what Madison was doing," Robert continued. "My staff reported it, but I chose not to intervene. She's dating my son, and I thought it would blow over. I thought you would just quit and find somewhere else to work out." His honesty was refreshing, if disappointing. "And now I realize I was wrong," Robert said simply. "Not just about you, but about what kind of business I want to run. What happened here? What you did? It opened my eyes." He gestured around the gym, where members worked out in an atmosphere notably more respectful than it had been 6 months earlier. "I'm implementing new policies," Robert explained. "Zero tolerance for harassment, mandatory respect training for all staff, and I'm establishing a scholarship program for people who might not otherwise be able to afford membership here." Kira raised an eyebrow. "That's quite a change." "It's overdue," Robert admitted. "I built this business to help people become their best selves. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that includes everyone, not just the people who already look like athletes." He pulled out a business card and handed it to her. "I'd like you to consult on these new programs. Help us create an environment where what happened to you can never happen again." Kira looked down at the card, surprised. "Mr. Pierce, I'm not qualified." "You're the most qualified person I know," he interrupted. "You understand both sides of this equation. You know what it's like to be underestimated, and you know what real strength looks like. That's exactly what we need." That evening, Kira sat in her small apartment, staring at Robert Pierce's business card. Outside her window, the city hummed with its usual evening energy. Cars passed, people walked by, and life continued its endless cycle. 6 months ago, I was hiding from my past, she thought. Now I'm being asked to use it to help others. She thought about David, who had found his courage, about Madison, who had learned the difference between power and strength, about all the other members who now felt safe in a space that had once tolerated cruelty. Maybe that's what redemption really looks like, she mused. Not erasing who you used to be, but using those experiences to become who you're meant to be. The next morning, Kira called Robert Pierce and accepted his offer. The phantom was gone, buried beneath years of deliberately chosen kindness and carefully constructed normalcy. But Kira Volkov, software developer, gym member, and occasional consultant on human dignity, had found a way to honor her past while building her future. And in a world that often mistook cruelty for strength, that was perhaps the most powerful victory of all.